Olá! Thank you for watching this video series on translation and technology brought to you by the Language Resource Center at the University of Michigan and the Corpus-Driven Terminology and Translation Research Group from the University of Brasília. My name is Elisa Duarte Teixeira, and this is what we are going to go over in this video. So in this first video, we are going to talk about CAT tools. What are they and who are they for? And here are some of the topics that we are going to be covering in this video. We're going to talk about CAT tools, the meaning of the acronym CAT. Then we are going to talk about translation memory and machine translation. Then we are going to talk about some of the main features of CAT tools, features that most of them share. And I'm going to close the video giving you some tips on how to choose the best CAT tool to do your translation work, depending on your the translation job that you have ahead of you. So the first thing we need to know about CAT tools is the meaning of the acronym CAT, Computer Assisted Translation. That's what it stands for. And they are computer programs or suites with several applications that have the objective of making the translator's job easier, faster, more accurate, and more enjoyable. So their objective is to assist translators to do their job. And some people associate CAT tools with translation memory, which is very natural because it's their main feature. And we are going to talk about what is a translation memory in other videos and in the next slides. But I just wanted to let you know that besides this translation memory, CAT tools have several other features that help translators to do their work. And nowadays, with all the technology advancements, there are so many tools that translators can put together in this one place to help them translate that they are coming up with different names for CAT tools, which are actually more encompassing than just a CAT tool. Some people call them TENTs, translation environment tools, and there's also translation ecosystem, meaning that everything a translator might need should be in that place where he's working on that translation job. One thing that also can be confusing is the acronyms TM, which stands for translation memory, and MT, which stands for machine translation. And these two things are very different. Translation memory is a mechanism to record your choices as you go over your translation. So you have a sentence or a stretch of language from your source text, and then you provide a translation, and the computer is going to record that translation and keep a memory of those choices. And in future iterations of that same or similar passage, it's going to show you, look, you already translated this before, and do you want to reuse, to recycle that translation? Machine translation, on the other hand, is a computer doing the translation. And of course, it's based on human translations from several sources that they gather to train the computer. But nowadays, with artificial intelligence and all that, computers are actually making decisions about how to translate texts based on those translated documents that they have in their memory. So two completely different things. One, translation memories, human translating, and then the computer is assisting with the translation. Whereas in machine translation, the computer is translating, and then we humans have to decide if that's useful or not for our purposes. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about some of the main features that most CAT tools share. Of course, we all know by now that translation memory is one of the main features of all CAT tools. So you don't have a CAT tool without a translation memory. But nowadays, most of them also offer machine translation because, as you can imagine, both of them can be very useful to do a translation. And on top of that, most CAT tools also offer some kind of terminology management application to help translators keep track of their terminology, how they translated a certain term so they can use that same term every time that word pops up again in their source text. They most of them offer you some kind of context search. So let's say you are translating a passage and you know that you've translated something similar, a tiny small stretch of language that's not similar enough to bring up a translation memory stretch from the memory. So you can do a search and then have other options to translate that passage that you are working with. They also have quality assurance applications. Quality assurance is when you check to see if the terminology is consistent in all of your texts and all of your documents. You also check, for instance, if the conversions for money were done correctly, the weights and the measurements, which can be different from country to country, and a lot of punctuation, a lot of different aspects of the formal target text that you want to check during the quality assurance. And some of the CAT tools can also offer you the possibility of checking different dictionaries that you have to upload before you start working. They can help you aligning, which means putting together two texts that you have translated before when you're not using a CAT tool yet, to put them together to build a translation memory that you can then put in your CAT tool. And some of them, the most advanced and some paid ones, will help you to manage your translation project. And that means distributing text to different people, getting their translations back, sending those translations to revision and proofreading, and paying these people. So a more administrative tool to work with translation projects. So what do you need to know and what do you need to think about when you're choosing one of these or the many other ones that are available to do to be your CAT tool? The first thing you need to know is that CAT tools are not always useful. So if you are translating technical texts, if you are translating texts that are repetitive, such as scientific texts or any other text that has a lot of repetition and contains a lot of terminology, or that are too long, so it's harder for you to remember what you did like last month in the first part of the 600-page book, this is when the translation memory and CAT tools in general are going to be very helpful for you. Now, if you work with printed documents like diplomas, or if you work with the more creative texts like slogans and marketing campaigns, things like that, CAT tools may not be very useful for you, just because there is a learning curve that you actually need to, if you're going to spend money and time learning to use a CAT tool, you actually have to work with text that they are going to effectively help you translate. But in any case, even with the literary texts, it's going to help you a lot to keep the consistency, which means using the similar words or the same word every time, you'll have the same context and etc. So if you have a translation memory being provided to you, or if you're going to have a career in translation, I highly recommend that you learn how to use a CAT tool and choose one to work with your texts. Some things that you have to consider when you're making this choice: you have to think about the intended use of the tool. Is it going to be a tool for yourself, or you're going to be managing projects in the place that you work? So you might want to choose different tools depending on your objective. Of course, all of them have a learning curve. Usually the most complicated ones are the ones that give you the most freedom to make little changes and make the machine works perfectly for you, but also are the harder to learn because there are so many details that you have to learn about. So you need to think, how much control do you want over the tool, or do you need to have over the tool? You have to, of course, factor in the pricing, how much money you have to disburse for the first if you need to buy a CAT tool. If you're a starting translator, maybe you don't want to spend a lot of money in a CAT tool that you are not going to like over the time, or they're not going to be a good match for you. And the last thing I think you should factor in is who do you think will be working for? Because the translation market has different preferences. So there are some areas where the only possible file exchange is when you use Tradus. Everybody exchange Tradus memories and Tradus glossaries, although nowadays you have more easier to exchange files, but that's something you have to think about. What CAT tool the people that work with the kind of texts that you want to work with in the market? So here are some examples of CAT tools. Some of them are paid, some of them have paid and non-paid parts, and some of them are free, such as Omega T. SDL Tradus is the most used CAT tool in the market nowadays. SmartCat is a tool that has some free parts and some paid ones, and it's a very user-friendly tool if you're starting with CAT tools. And WordFast Anywhere, it's been in the market for a long time. It has 3 different flavors. One of them is WordFast Anywhere, available online, and you can work on a certain number of words for free, and then you pay if you reach that limit. I here put some links for you to get started in some of these CAT tools. I'll browse through them, see what are the prices, what you can do without paying, and I hope you enjoy trying some of these CAT tools, and that you find the perfect match for you and for your translation career. Thank you. I hope this content was useful to you. Please help us spread the word, and if you want to learn more about translation and technology, check the other videos in the series. Obrigada!